All right, so welcome to this month's Grand Campaign. I'm here with Richard and Josh as always. We're here on the Iconic Production channel. Gentlemen, how are you doing today?
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty good.
Josh is just waiting to swear.
I know. I had a whole string of expletives that I thought would be fun to open with, but then I'm just not actually that guy.
That's right.
Yeah.
I don't know that any of us.
You know you're safe because
That's right.
I'm not really going to do it.
So today, go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
I was going to say we're going to start a series of shows on what resources are imperative for a grand campaign, how we organize them in our games, and maybe what we can share with the fans. But before we get into that, Richard, how are your games going?
They're going all right. When I say they're going all right, I mean that we've missed the last session of each of them because people were sick with the COVID, or people were traveling to see family, or people have fallen in love, and suddenly the fact that they're getting married this summer is more important to them than showing up to play on Monday nights. No, it's all fine. It's all good. Actually, it turned out to be a really busy couple of weeks for my family, so I was able to just kind of like actually have a rest night and chill with the kids. So it's all fine. But yeah, there's both of them are going pretty well. We actually ended our Fading Suns campaign on a really, or not ended the campaign, ended our last session of the Fading Suns campaign on a really fun cliffhanger, which is the players have realized that so there's this order, there's a psychic coven that wants to use one of the players to open a portal to release things that were imprisoned there a long time.
Yeah, like you do.
Like you do. Sort of standard stuff. And this entire time, everyone, including the Psychic Coven, has been thinking it was this one particular member of the party who is a psychic. And so she's been getting all this attention, and she's like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And then, but actually, this whole time, I've actually had it planned that it's this other character who happens to be played by my wife. Who is very clever and good at solving puzzles. Yeah. And so I sort of set her up, like they finally get to the gateway, and I just set her up with, here's the puzzle for the gate. And she's like, let me try this, let me try this, let me try this. So finally she opens it, and that's when all of the bad psychics show up. And they're like, oh,
excellent.
I guess we had the wrong chosen one.
As has been prophesied.
And they're all like, what? So that was nice.
It's always a good.
Yeah. It's nice when people scream a little bit at the end of the session. So I'm looking forward to getting back to that once everybody's kind of back from their wanderings and convalesced and everything. So.
Well, I mean, you could always do what my gaming group did for my bachelor party. I don't know if I've shared this with you. They were like, "Hey, we're gonna play D&D for your bachelor party." I'm like, "This is great." So I show up and I'm like, "All right, where should I sit?" And they're like, "There." And I'm like, "That's the GM's chair." "Yeah, what did you bring?" I had to run D&D for my own bachelor party.
Nice.
My friends suck.
Nice.
You suck, Adam and Jim and Kelly.
So what did you do to them though?
I just pulled out a random Ravenloft dungeon and just tortured them for like 8 hours. It was wonderful. Yeah. Josh, how's Gebercan going?
Gebercon's going well. I don't remember what the last thing that happened was, but currently well, I know what happened last in the campaign, but the last thing I've related here. But the two major things at the moment are they've discovered basically the tomb / prison of one of the ancient beings that used to rule the world, and I've modeled the creature. I've modeled it after Achilles. So okay, cool. That's going to be very bad when it breaks out, but they did not end up investigating.
I mean, it's not going to be that bad. It's going to break out and then just pout for 3/4 of the campaign.
But that last quarter is going to be a doozy.
Is he going to send his best friend, who is also trapped with him, out in his armor to really scare?
I've been trying to figure out an angle to work a Patroclus in there.
Well, it's very easy. You just have one of the player characters actually be the reincarnated best friend of the ancient entity, but they don't know it, and then they find out.
But so that thing is going to be coming for the major cities in the area, because each is founded on basically a grove grown from the essence of an ancient hag. and the people who live there have forgotten that that's the case, but it is a source of power. So that thing is breaking out soon, and they don't know.
Fun.
Yeah,
And then more immediate to the
definitely
party,
feel like there's an old hat joke.
a little while ago, one of the party members, in a moment of panic because the party was going to die, took a bit of an aberration and shoved it into their face to try and gain some additional power.
Is Ben in your game?
I was like, it's either Ben or PJ, right? Those are the two.
It worked a little bit, and
It always works a little bit.
But he's basically been fighting inside his own head as this thing is now trying to take him over, and the party has been trying to like cut it out of him or cover it up or whatever. But in the middle of one battle, he got taken out, and I took him into a different room and just narrated these visions and experiences that his character was having as he was trying to negotiate with the being inhabiting his face. And basically, each time I just described a scenario with one of his parents that started out well and then just got weird. Like his dad just opened up his rib cage and invited him to dance, and just like things that started normal and then got really weird. And just each time asked him what he was going to do. And the first time he resisted, and it was a contested check, and he succeeded. And then the second time he was like, "No, I'll dance with him." Okay.
Is that when the aberration took over?
So hold on. The normal thing was the opening of the rib cage, but the weird thing was the dancing.
Yeah. So
Some
we went through
players-
two more, and each time he went along with it. And so when the party got him back on his feet, I was like, yeah, and that thing on his face, it's gone. It's just like a smooth, empty eye socket. That's
good.
It's probably okay.
And it freaked them the hell out, and they tried to figure out what was going on, and they couldn't, because that character is now the aberration. So I sat down and explained to him that he is now the aberration, and worked through a bunch of abilities, and his goal is now simply to assimilate all life and to use the party to gain access to more and more powerful things to assimilate.
Neat.
Yeah, so it's like a fantasy board.
Yeah, and the party
I like
has no
saying
idea.
that. I regret saying that almost immediately.
Fantasyboard.tumblr.com.
Yep. Will not be in the show notes.
So there's a lot of things that are going to come together in the next couple of episodes. They're currently investigating ghosts that have been terrorizing people, which are actually, JM, I think I sent you the stat sheet for this.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's the Black Crier,
Mm-hmm.
which is basically a ghost that shows up at places of what will soon be a site of slaughter and bloodshed, and start declaring news. So they're trying to figure out what's going on there.
Are they investigating any sort of missing people that seem to be randomly going away in the town that they're at?
They keep hearing rumors of, yeah, they just like found his clothes laid out on his bed and he's just gone.
Yes.
So they keep hearing that.
Sorry, guys. I lost track of what Josh was saying because I've just been thinking of dirty board jokes now.
Yeah.
No.
You should share them because resistance is futile. All right, so today we're starting a series on what resources do you need as a GM to run a grand campaign. And these are going to be a variety of different topics we're going to talk about over the next couple of months. But basically, our thoughts were you need a good way of managing the world, a good way of managing time, a good way of managing the story, and a good way of managing the characters. As Richard pointed out, how many characters did you end up having at the end of your tour game?
I think in the tour campaign we had about 80 player characters.
Yeah. Like, there needs
Did you
to
say 80?
80.
80, yeah. 80. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. About 20 people who played in the campaign, not all at once. But we'd have, we always had a core group of 4 to 5 people. And then occasionally people would say, hey, I want to play like a one shot. We're like, all right, well, here's your dwarf.
Yeah.
And so some of those 80 player characters are characters that got played only 3 or 4 sessions before something happened, or they died, or the one shot they were there for, and then some of them got played for like 100 sessions.
Yeah.
So it's but yeah, 80 player characters by the time it was all done.
Right, and that's something that you need to know going into this, especially if you're trying to run the grand campaign as we've defined and outlined it.
Yeah.
You need it. You need to get your management set up beforehand, and then, as we've talked about, once the game gets rolling, it becomes very easy to GM. But it also, as you just brought up with the character thing, that's why there's so many jackals running around because it's just like, hey, I'd like to play a game. Well, cool. I don't have to come up with something off the cuff for you. I've got some friends who already want to go do something outside of the main scope. Why don't you join them for this one session? And then you're making one character as opposed to dozens, or just using a pre-generated set.
I strongly recommend everybody, if you're going to run a campaign like this, you should always have in your pocket a kind of adventuring excuse. So like a recurring patron is an idea that works really well. The Jackals things works well, and in Jackals you would just basically it's the same NPC who send the people out every time, and things like then you don't have to get in the headspace of a new NPC, and you can loosely connect those adventures together in your own mind.
Yeah.
So we had a sort of order of rangers in the tour game, who didn't actually come up very often. But anytime we were in that part of Wilderland and a couple of players missed, we needed like a couple of extra, let's say a couple of players missed, we don't want to advance the main storyline without them. And so we said, well, you guys come anyway, here's a pre-gen. And then we do like a one-off that ties back into the bigger thing. Something else that works really well for this. I did this in a D&D campaign that I never really got off the ground.
The Straits?
Yeah. And so we had this group, the Claws of the Lioness, which I stole from Max. Because it's a great idea.
Yeah.
And basically it's just like it's like the Pathfinder Society or something like that. It's just, here's a troubleshooting organization. It's got the same 2 NPC patrons every time. And they have their own story that only Richard knows, and then you get to play, whenever we do a pickup game.
Right. It comes out through emergent storyline, and like I was talking with Josh about this. That sort of emergent storyline is sort of the basis of like all of the Souls games and Elden Ring. There is no story. You have to pick it up.
I thought that you got sucked into the Elden Ring.
I did get sucked into the Elden Ring.
I'm a little disappointed.
I woke up one morning. Like, legitimately, I woke up one morning and Bob, I had this email from him that it was like, Steam, someone has gifted you Elden Ring.
Holy crap.
And I was like, well, I should try it.
Yeah.
It's that first dopamine cycle.
Yeah, really, the first one is free.
The first one's free.
Yeah.
So we're going to talking about world management. Like, we've talked a lot about how if you've done your homework, if you will, if you've set up the world well, the grand campaign is easy.
Yeah.
Right? You just need to know one world, and you need to know it really well. And so when we talk about background work, what does that mean to you guys? Like, doing it well before the game starts gives you the most bang for your buck. What would you consider good prep work and good foundational world management for the start of a campaign?
Josh?
Know how magic works, and if you've got different kinds of it, right, different schools of magic or different types, whatever, know how those function, and how do I say this so that it makes sense? Right, what do they operate on? Right, is it a sort of magic that operates? Right, so is it a sort of magic that operates on an understanding of a specific element? Is it something that flows from a person who uses it, or are there forces in the world that a magic user can manipulate?
Yeah.
And that's really important for me because, well, it's important, I think, for a world that has a lot of history and previous empires, right, previous civilizations, whatever, because that's going to determine what your ruins look like. It's going to determine what's in them. It's going to determine where they're going to be found in the world. It's so I find that understanding how my magic systems work is extraordinarily helpful for me in really everything. I see you use abductive reasoning here, and that's the trap that I always fall into. I might sit down and try to say, great, I've got an ogre in a cave. Why? And 10 minutes later,
you're 10,000 years in the past.
Well, I'm trying to figure out, well, why does anything exist in the first place in this world, right? And only once I've decided that can I work my way back up. So magic is an important one for me.
What about you, Richard?
I think that what makes a world feel real, what gives verisimilitude, is when everything that happens in the world kind of follows its own internal logic based on the desires of the people in the world. So what I like to do, let's say you draw out a map, right? And you draw out a map, and there are a lot of, if you run like at least one campaign, you can probably like sort of just eyeball the map, but there are a lot of books. For instance, Axe has a really cool set of instructions in the beginning for like figuring out population density and like how many peasants live in a village and how many villages are around a town and how many towns are there in a province, and things like that based on kind of real world calculations.
Demographics and economics.
Based on like real world population density from like late antiquity and the early Middle Ages and things like that. So that's a really helpful section of the book, even if you're not going to run Axe. That's a really helpful section of the book. But once you get a map, basically what you need to do is start marking up points of interest. Points of interest can be monster lairs, they can be cities, they can be towns, they can be villages, they can be ruins, they can be whatever.
Pools of magical energy, things that people are going to want.
Haunted forests.
Haunted forests.
Yes. Yeah. So you want to map out, I would say, 10 to 15 points of interest on your local area to start with. If you're doing an entire world, then you need more than that. But let's say to begin with, you need 10 to 15 points of interest. And then for each point of interest, what I like to do is to make a bullet list for each point of interest, which is not so much just hooks. Like I always do, eventually I'll use this process to generate hooks to give the players like session 1. Here's if they try to find rumors, I'll be like, all right, roll a d6. Here's the rumor that you find, right? Some of those things are true, some of those things are not, but they all go somewhere, right? But what I like to do is to kind of lay out, well, here are, for each point of interest, list of bullet points. Who lives here, right? What do they want, right? What is it that, maybe it's a monster, the monster wants something in particular. But usually it's just people. And people, people who live in a village, what do they want? What are they scared of? In other words, like, what would they be willing to, you're really asking two questions. What would they be willing to pay the players to do, or ask the players to do, or force the players to do? And then also, like, what are the actions the players could take that they would see as threatening because it threatens their well-being in some kind of way? And what you can do this stuff like mostly intuitively, but it's really good to, I think, just make that bullet list of who lives here, why are they here, what do they want, what's their biggest threat, what are they most afraid of, and do that. And then you can start like getting into, well, now I'm going to plan the lair, I'm going to plan the dungeon, or seed the treasure, whatever it is. But as far as world management goes, that's what I like to start with.
Yeah, and I do something similar, but I add a layer of, and I think you mentioned this, I'll just tease it out a bit. I start with my factions. Who are the big players in the area?
Yeah.
Okay, now I have this layer. Which one of these wants this? Who's maybe fighting over it? Who is rebelling against this? And once you get your core conflicts and you have your points of interest and you understand how the world works kind of metaphysically, you're ready to go.
So that's the thing. We're talking a few hours of prep up front.
Yeah.
But then you don't really need to plan a session.
No.
At that point.
Just point them in a direction which is good. Like, I think that's, we talk about, a lot of people want online, I don't know, I'm making a broad generalization, let me back out. There is a specific type of advice.
All people, and they're wrong.
True. Yeah, there's a specific type of advice that says the easiest way to run a game is to do absolutely no prep and just essentially be lazy and go forward. And what we're saying is
sort of lazy DM.
DMing, probably a game master because they're probably not running it.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But I would say that for me, I get the best I get the easiest session prep when I've done this again 2 to 3 to 4. I mean, it stacks over each campaign, and if you're digging into one world, every time you do a campaign setup, that world. I still remember one of the first times we played the Starlight Cabal. You said, "Man, Tanar feels like it has moss on it.
Sure.
Like things have been here." And I've made different world decisions for the Zaharets, but it was a game that had layers because we had played so many times in it that rock wasn't just there for no reason because I wanted it to be. It had sort of accreted this history around it. But again, like for 10 years, there were no dragons. So when you teased out the one dragon NPC into a dragon, the people who had played in those campaigns, they lost their minds because they were like, no, there are no dragons here. That was probably the best session of that first TVK. Now here's the thing: you can cheat at this level, right? If you go with an established campaign setting, you can definitely cheat, and you can definitely just dig into the lore that's already there. Richard ran in Middle Earth, and I mean there was double cheating because you had everything that Tolkien had, and then you had all of Richard's knowledge of Tolkien. So you knew the answers to a lot of these questions just instinctually.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff I sort of played the for most of that stuff I just played the Iron Age Germania card.
Yes.
This is like, is there an answer in Tolkien for this? No, then I'm gonna go like I'll just do the Gothic thing, or I'll just do the Norse thing here.
Yeah. And what do the sagas say?
Right. Yeah.
Bite a shield. And,
yes.
Yeah. And go after it. We'll get to Geberkan in a second, but I mean, there are a ton that, like, Star Wars, right? Star Wars, in theory, I'm going to try not to let my prejudice show. The expanded universe gives you tens of thousands of years of history.
So this is the nice thing about an established world,
Mm-hmm.
is that not only is it easy for you as a GM to fill in the blanks,
Mm-hmm.
but also the players fill in a lot of the blanks in their own head.
Yeah.
If you're running a Star Wars game, for instance, even my kids know, if I do X, then Y will probably happen,
Mhm.
because that's how it goes in a Star Wars story. If I shoot a control panel, the door will close.
That's right.
Unless the door's already closed, and the door will open. Let's just do the reverse of whatever state the door is in when I shoot the control panel.
I still feel like there's got to be an alien race that is watching our historical
Yes.
archives and then
Yes.
basically has it do the opposite.
Yes.
And that's how humanity gets wiped out.
Yeah, probably.
So the old world for Warhammer.
Right.
You have not just the old world history, but you have essentially all of the Holy Roman Empire to fall back on. Glorantha has like 40 years of history. I would say, arguably, Forgotten Realms and Golarion, you could run in those worlds because they've been around. Golarian's 10, 12, 13 years old now, and Forgotten Realms.
Yeah,
It's
if
huge.
people have already gamed in those settings once or twice before, then a lot of the basic implicit assumptions, they'll fill in, and then you actually have to do less work
Mhm.
as a GM.
Yeah.
When you're presenting like a totally new setting, then you have to do a little more.
Yeah, which is why we're going to go to Geberkan here. The other one I was thinking of is the Imperium from Dune. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like
if somebody like that's it's more obscure knowledge. These
it
days.
is, but I do think that, like, for Fading Suns, I was able to tell most of my players, think Dune,
Right.
and that's a key touchstone.
Yeah.
Touchstone there. Now, the reason I said we'd save Geberkan for last, we all have created our own worlds that we have been digging into. Richard, Amboria for The World Under Starlight for decades. The Zaharets for me, Geberkan for... Josh, you've actually hit the point in your Geberkan gaming where you have created your own player's guide that is a not insubstantial chunk of knowledge for your players if they choose to use it. Do you want to talk about how you put that together as a resource for your players?
Yeah. It started as most of my passion projects do with frustration, because I think, Richard, you said, right, yeah, somebody playing in Star Wars knows if you shoot the panel, the door will close. But I found my players frequently coming into the world and thinking, oh, well, if I do this 5th edition thing, then this 5th edition result will happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept looking at that and going, that is not how Gebrakan
This
works.
is because he never read Tasha's Guide to Everything, and so does not know about Session Zero.
That's right. Session 0, which did not exist before.
Did not
Tasha's
exist
Guide.
before Tasha's Guide.
Well, no, I had tried to explain it.
Yeah.
It just,
Yeah.
I don't know. There were a lot of things that just seemed so ingrained in my players, most of whom were also fairly new to D&D and were not like they were not regular readers of like any kind of fantasy.
Okay.
So they just kind of fell into a lot of the fifth edition things. So I started trying to figure. That's when I started to realize that fifth edition wasn't working very well in my world, and so something needed to change. And it wasn't going to be my world. So I started to
Good
modify
decision.
fifth edition rules, and that's when I stumbled across, I think, the fact that I think we talked about it in a previous session, that the kind of story you're trying to tell is going to be very related to the system that you're using to tell it. And I wasn't
Mhm.
able to articulate that, but I stumbled across that realization in some form or another. So I had to sit down and create something that I wanted to be able to hand it to anybody who came to my table and say, right, take a look at this, and let me know of any questions you have. But this should start us all on the same foundation.
Yeah.
And then it ballooned up to like 110 pages or so, and I realized that there's no way anybody's actually going to read this.
Well, you'd be surprised if you can get players who want every bit of lore and knowledge and
Right.
hymnographies.
Yeah, I actually just tried to make all of my lore, including the actual rules for how healing with herbs works, to lay it all out in trochaic tetrameter. That way, only the really dedicated players
Actually know how
it works.
Yeah.
Well, the other experience that I wanted as a DM was I wanted to be able to reference something and have players go, "Oh no," without me having to like explain to them, "This is really bad." By the way, your character would know that this is really bad. I wanted to establish a background so that I could reference things and players could genuinely react and make connections and feel apprehension or excitement or dread or whatever. And then the final part of it was I'm running a complete sandbox, and my players tend to have trouble with that because having no clear direction, that there's not a lot of ambition.
Right.
And so I tried to give them enough information and touchstones for them to start to kind of, okay, well, I want to do this. I want to solve the problem where nothing can exist outside the city walls because right, the universe has a sort of, not the universe, right? The wilderness has a sort of immune response to it. And anytime it is perceived that, you know, humanity is building anything outside the existing cities, right? The wilderness starts marshaling armies. Like it'll leave the cities where they are, but so I wanted players to have enough touchstones and understanding to say, great, I want to build a fortress and establish a whole new settlement and be able to protect and defend that.
Yes.
Great. Like the campaign is now basically revolving around you trying to accomplish that ambition. So I wanted to give them enough touchstones to have some places to go in the midst of a very large sandbox.
Well, and that's interesting because, you know, we talked about points of interest and creating the hooks and the ties to the campaign world, but you bring up a good point. Like giving your players enough rope to hang them. I mean, giving your players reward for being ambitious and for playing in the world the way you set it up is big. Like I know in Emboria, had they studied those star charts more, they probably wouldn't be in this current situation.
That is true. That is true. I mean, the thing I like to use to get my players going initially is to deeply offend them and their characters personally, in some way within the first 2 sessions. This is always my goal, is that something should happen that they're going to take so personally that they will become just a driving force of vengeance.
You mean like Ben's character trying to assassinate that one guy?
Yeah, I mean that was a lot later in the campaign.
I know, but still,
yeah,
they
just
keep
like
falling
at
for
the
it.
beginning, just give them something like a wrong that needs to be right, something that defends their sense of justice, or
Mhm.
something their characters let them start with this really nice thing and then take it away immediately, something like that. Like you gotta make them a little mad.
You got to make them mad because
I'm a bad person.
that'll lead them to leaving, as Josh was saying. That
Right.
you got to give them a reason to step beyond the walls.
Right.
We're talking about the gumshoe system on the Iconic podcast, and I think the best thing the gumshoe system has added to Call of Cthulhu or Cthulian gaming is every character has to have a drive. Why are they willing to do this?
Yeah.
Knowing that sanity loss awaits them, why would they continue to go out there? You don't need that on a character sheet, but it helps to understand what motivates players to step out beyond the safety of the walls, because that was your tour game, right? It was Adventures in Wilderland. It wasn't Adventures behind the Woodman's Palace.
Actually, in the tour game, we started in the middle of the journey.
Awesome.
So like, you guys are you're already trapped.
We're not even giving you the option. You're
already trapped.
You're halfway between point A and B, and something interesting happens.
Right. Yeah.
That's how I started my most recent campaign. Was they were all in quarantine caravan.
Did you say in quarantine?
Yes.
It's a little. I don't know. That's a little on the nose.
I know. It was a world. It was an unfortunate world building thing that happened to coincide.
Should be
with
our next T-shirt.
It was an unfortunate world building.
Thing. And you're dead.
Right. Well, right, because all of civilization is crammed inside tightly packed cities, right? Disease is a massive threat. So there's just a lot of safety measures, and so they basically started right before going on a caravan when a hag generated storm nearly destroyed the part of the city that they were in, and so hags have been cropping up occasionally, and that part of the world they're a little they're kind of focused on. To the point that one of them ran into a hag, and his first move in trying to not be killed by it was to seduce it, and that has been an endless source of amusement and mockery at the table.
Sometimes you got to come with the story. Sometimes the story pops up on its own.
So is that a hilf?
Hag?
It's
I have to take a note of the T-shirt idea.
Super sorry that I said that.
It's the same character who shoved an aberration in.
Oh, okay. Right. Yeah, this person just has poor impulse control.
Yeah. So let me ask you both this, because Richard's running an Emboria, which didn't actually start as a role-playing thing, but has been like a secondary world that you know very well.
Yep.
Gebercan. You're looking at designing your own system for Gebercan here. Zaharet's for me. But you mentioned an unfortunate world-building decision. So, one, are there any of those that come up to mind, like that you made at the table, or do you find that because you've been in this one space so long that you can, let's call it 80-90% of the time, if something comes up, you know the world well enough that you can make a abductive reasoning decision and say, this is why this is going forward?
So, an important part of my GMing philosophy is that I never make mistakes.
Okay.
If I make something which could be perceived as a mistake,
Be rule one.
It is actually just a very clever retcon.
Yeah. Okay.
And so when I do make, unfortunate world building decisions, the thing I would do most often would be to do something that would basically create a discrepancy between what the players already know.
Yes.
because it's already lore that we've established, and just in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes like I'm off working on poetry with my notebook and I don't have access to all the books at home that are also full of poetry, right? Or the time to like go through and fact check everything that I write. So like little discrepancies are going to show up.
Right.
And those are the kinds of things that I run into the most. Sometimes also, there are 1 or 2 times in my GMing career, and I will not say when, not anytime recently, if any players are watching this.
That's right.
But occasionally, I will forget where an NPC is supposed to be.
Oh, yeah.
And the players will be like, wait a minute, why is she here? She's supposed to be back in such and such town. In that moment, you can say, oh, yeah, my bad. It's not her. Just look like her.
Yeah.
You could do that.
Yeah. Or you could go weird.
Or you could be like, well, I guess there's a doppelganger in this.
That's
So,
when in doubt, use a doppelganger.
yeah, so those are the like, as far as like a big like cosmological world building mistake that I've made, I don't think I've ever done anything like that in a tabletop context, mostly because, you know, sort of like you're making your own world. There aren't really wrong decisions.
Exactly.
Like, it's just whatever you want it to be.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not your players find that compelling, you know, so I guess like what makes something a world building mistake, but certainly inconsistencies, these things like that, they creep in because we're only human.
We are only human.
So you kind of, when you identify them, you need to get creative about how you kind of retcon that information, especially like as
we're definitely not lizards in human suits.
Definitely not, Josh. We are human, and
Just
we're
like
not learning human behavior from you so that we can fool the rest of society.
That's right.
I would be a poor subject.
I think we all.
Yeah, that's fair. But anyway, so that's what I would say is in a grand campaign, the kind of world building mistake you're going to run into the most often is going to be inconsistencies.
Mhm.
So you can do a few things to help with this. Keep good records. I mean, just like a very easy GMing trick, which I think everyone knows,
Mhm.
right? Is you make a list of 50 NPC names
Mhm.
that don't belong to anybody at the start of a campaign. And then when the players are like, oh, do I see anybody interesting around? Roll perception. Oh, yeah, you see a really sketchy looking character sweeping the, you know, at the end, kind of listening in on your conversation. I'm going to walk up to that guy and talk to him. What's his name? His name is John Matthew.
Yeah,
He's a weird little pale dude.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
with skin like white chocolate.
With skin like white chocolate.
That's right.
Smooth.
Smooth dough.
And so then I'll write down next to that NPC's name.
Here's who they are, where they're
Here's who they are, and like 3 descriptive
Yep.
terms. You know, scar that the players will remember. People always remember scars.
Mhm.
This is another GMing hack. Like if you're like, oh yeah, you see a guy, he's got like a very slight scar just on the side of his cheek. Oh, he's a scar, you say.
That's right. Instantly lodged in my player
He must be a
recollection.
very interesting man. How did he get that scar? People always want to know, and like it doesn't matter how he got the scar, because you can just play it cool. But yeah. That's a long story. We don't have time for that
That's
right
right. The pressing matter is
Yes. Yeah. So I'll write down next to that name, where did the players meet him, and 2 or 3 descriptors, because when they come back to that place, somehow players who can't remember any other important details of your campaign, like major plot hooks or important lore dumps, they'll remember, oh,
John Matthews, the guy who sweeps at the ends of the
isn't
street.
there that guy here? Yeah, we should go and talk to him, see how he's doing.
Yeah.
So, and then when you go to update your records later, you know, I mean, I use Evernote because I'm a little old school, and Evernote is apparently like a dinosaur now. But
Yeah, I love it.
oh yeah. Well, I mean, like I think OneNote's a lot more popular
Yeah.
these days. But anyway, actually, the support for Evernote has gotten really bad, so I think it's on its way out. So I got to port things over. But so I always keep just like a document on locations, and you know, it's things like. And it's really easy as long as you update this stuff after you run a session. It's really easy to do, and just like
That's the key.
bullet points. What happened here?
Mhm.
Who did the players talk to the last time they were here? What's going on? And then, you know, come back to town. I'm like, oh yeah, this lady was thinking about leaving her husband, and so now I can make sure that the players got a little bit of that drama last time, and when they come back to the settlement, they get some more of that drama this time. It makes it feel like the world is really kind of organic
And moving on even when
they're not there.
Yeah, that's
Right.
and that's
Yeah.
key.
Yeah, it's not WandaVision.
Josh and I use Scrivener. I'm going to toss out as opposed to
Oh,
say,
that's cool. I'll have to check it out.
yeah, I like Scrivener for
It's
this.
fantastic.
Yeah, for keeping notes. But that's kind of what I was going to talk about. Like bringing up is the fact that how do you guys keep notes? Like I always have a notebook that I write everything down in. Usually a lectern because Richard got
Long term, but yes.
got
Yes.
me in
Yeah.
that. But then I transferred all to Scrivener because Scrivener exists on every device. So if I wake up in the middle of the night and have a great idea, I can lean over, type it up on my phone, and go back to sleep, and I know that it's going to be there.
Yeah, Evernote used to be like it too, but like you said, their support has gotten kind of.
I'm looking right at you, Evernote. You are not supported by the.
You guys can't see Evernote because it's green.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But it's right there, right
Yeah.
behind you, Richard.
Elephant.
It's stalking towards you. You use Scrivener as well.
I use Scrivener, legal pads, and then Notability on
Yes.
on my iPad because that lets me handwrite stuff. So typically what I'll do is to prepare for a session, I'll create something on Notability that has just my notes for the session, so character descriptions, some quotes for some potential conversations that are going to happen, and things like that, because I can color code it, I can shift it around manually, and
Right.
I like that ability. I use legal pads to take notes during a session, and then Scrivener is all of my world building, it's all of my lore, and it's all of my I'll run a session using my legal pads and Notability, and then consulting Scrivener if some lore comes up or I need to remind myself of
Right.
something that's been long established. And then Saturday I'll get up and I'll take my Notability and my legal pads and then put all of that into Scrivener along with notes about what actually happened as opposed to like what I planned. Yeah, I use Scrivener occasionally actively during the session, but it's mostly my world building and storage and occasionally a quick reference.
There have been times where I've recorded game sessions, just the audio, so I could go back and
Yeah.
listen to them because that's also super
Yeah.
helpful. But I think kind of for me, why world management is great in a grand campaign is we're not talking about, hey, you have to memorize Saltmarsh from start to finish.
Right.
For Saltmarsh.
Right.
We're saying you're going to put this work in here, and then the next time you start a new adventure or a new campaign, because the next generation is ready, or a side group is ready, or some new friends want to come and give it a shot. Each time you do this, it accretes and grows larger and more well-defined, and you're getting the benefit of all of the work you put in the previous time before.
Yeah. Have we talked about recaps?
No, let's do recaps. That's a great place. We'll end here with
this
recaps.
might be a good place to end because this is also an important part of world management, but it's also kind of a sneaky form of player management.
Mm-hmm.
So when I first started out, and I think I just got this from you, I would always just like ask some player to do the recap. But I realized really quickly that whoever you asked to do the recap, and I realized this a sneaky way because I would do this to you. Whoever you asked to do the recap actually has a little bit of control over the tone,
its purpose,
and
really.
events
Yes.
of what was happening. So like I would always do all the Numenera recaps, and I would be like, what was significant to me last session?
Yeah.
You know?
And we still have all the records. I downloaded
we
that
do.
before.
Yeah.
What a great game.
Before what blew up?
Google Plus.
Oh, but I have them all on Drive.
Yeah, I know. I made sure I saved the archive.
Yeah. No, I kept pretty meticulous records for that campaign. It was a lot of fun. So what I do, what I realized is whoever does the recap gets to subtly adjust and determine the tone of the session that evening. So what I started doing is, and this is a good thing and a bad thing. I think it has maybe made my players a little lazy in certain ways because they're like, oh, well, Richard will remember the things that are important, even if we don't remember them. But also, to be fair to them, we do play every other week.
Yeah.
So, like, sometimes remembering, like, what are we working on again? Like, what's going on? We're all adults with lives and things like this. It's a little tricky. So, sometimes. So, what I do is what I like to do is I'll write a little recap that always starts with when last we left our heroes, unless which I stole from Matt Colville.
Yeah.
Unless the players are doing badly, and then it's when last we left our heroes?
Question mark?
Yeah.
You Ron Burgundy?
Yes. Yeah. Like
I'm
if
Ron Burgundy?
Yeah, if I ended on a question mark, then the players know, oh crap, things are not going well for us.
That's not what we expected.
And what I like to basically, I do recap what happened in the previous session, but then I don't recap it like try to like word for word, because I do record all the sessions that we play online, which is our Fading Suns game right now.
Yeah.
I do record all of the sessions and put them on YouTube, so anybody could go back and just watch or listen to the session again. Sometimes I'll do that if I need a little like memory jog on.
I do the same thing with the board game.
Forgot to write down the name of an NPC or like whatever, you know. But a lot of times I'll realize, oh, you know, things are starting to go the wrong direction in the previous session. So let me just slightly adjust the priorities, adjust the, you know, keep things. So it's like a way of like, you could like say like softly railroading your players now and then, especially in a big sandboxy game, or in a game like Fading Suns, which is not really a sandbox. I mean, it could be, but the players have, but the thing is with the Fading Suns game right now, the players have a very long list of things that they've actually committed to. And it's like 3 or 4 different things for 3 or 4 different factions.
Yeah.
Maybe it's all related actually, and they don't realize it, you know. But probably. But they've got all these different goals, and so if I don't sort of like remind them, hey, this is the stuff that you said was really important at the end of last session, or you might have missed this little detail, so just like subtly work it into the recap. And what I find is that makes the players be a little less aimless, especially if it's been a long day. Help them be a little less aimless, because otherwise the first 30 minutes of a session are always,
what do we do?
what are we doing again? What's going on? So
Make it a little more coffee.
yeah, so I think that recapping, and actually almost, if you get this right, like if you have your world set up, you have your lore set up and your monsters statted out and things like that. If you have your world set up, almost all of your prep is actually just writing the recap. Because by the time you get to the end of the writing the recap, you will know, oh, here are the logical next steps for my NPCs. Here's the logical next step for the consequences of the player's actions, all those things. So if you just sit down after a session, I usually do it the morning after, and just like write down a recap of the session. By the time you're done writing the recap, you will know what the next session is going to be. And we're talking, 10 or 20 minutes of time.
Yeah, it's not that long.
Yeah, this is actually pretty. There's some work on the front end, but this style of campaign is actually very low prep once you get momentum going.
Yeah.
So.
Now, Josh, you do your recaps on Discord, like you post them on your Discord channel.
Yeah, we've got a whole. I don't remember what. There's servers and channels. Yeah, so I have a whole channel that's just recaps, and I'll post those. I try to do them on the morning after. But
I had a Glorantha one, and I do a Jackals one for the on a Google page. Richard, you have a blog that you posted most of your recaps on, right?
All of the ones for the Emboria campaign go on a shared blog that the players also have access to, so they can use it for their own record keeping.
Yes. I offer rewards to players. I give them advances in Jackals if they write up a recap.
Same.
And so I try to keep my recaps pretty vague. Like, here's the things that happen, because the players are also writing their recaps. And right now I have 2 players who are writing their recaps sort of in opposition to another character in the group. So Kanan is downplaying everything that Zaheen does and upplaying everything he does, so that the glory gets attached to his story and not to the other guys. And the other guy is now writing him in response, and they're always trying to undercut, which is great because they're getting kind of lost in their own story, which is probably the most human thing they could be doing. These characters are now alive and real to them.
I had one player who very often writes letters home to his mother, and so he'll do a recap as a letter for some extra XP. I will post that on the post that on the blog.
And there are a ton of great places to do this. Have a channel on your Discord server for your game.
Yeah,
you can get Obsidian Portal, I think, is still around, but you can make a Google page. You can World Anvil is now like a thing that's apparently really cool. Shared blogs. There are ways to keep track of your campaign.
I hate to tie it to any like really specific little like boutique service because I'm always like, well, what if that goes away?
Yeah.
You know?
Realmworks, I don't know. I used to put a lot of Tanar stuff into Realmworks, and I don't even know if I have access to that anymore. I should look at that. But yeah, set up a blog, set up even just a Google Doc, something that is accessible to multiple people and can be edited or added to.
Something else that I've added to the recap experience as of the Fading Suns game, and I think this has been a cool thing. I don't know how much it has paid off, but is doing and this is part of it. This is partly like a Dune callback because Dune is one of the major touch points for Fading Suns. Is you know how every chapter of Dune starts with a found text, right? Like a text from the world by one of the books the princess wrote, right?
Princess Irulan, right?
Yes, yeah. And so, so I start every Fading Sun session with an in-world text.
Nice.
Like a piece of hagiography or poetry or prophecy or a scientific journal or like a news article or a coded transmission or something like that. Every session begins with one of those. And it always foreshadows something that will happen in the session that night.
Based off the recap that you have done, you know it at least when the first scene started.
As long as you're kind of vague with your foreshadowing, you can mostly get away with this. And I don't know I don't know how much the players have picked up on that or started to pick up on that, but I have fun with it. And you know, I've got this one document, and all the document is the in-world text and then the recap for each session.
Yeah.
So,
what about you, Josh? How do you handle your recap? Do you have your players write them? Do you write them? Do you try to like do a hyper detailed recap? What if someone were to go onto your Discord server? How would they see your recaps and your right? Because recapping is part of the world management. How are you managing your world that way?
My main focus with the recaps is just what were the events that happened.
Okay.
Just because that's actually mostly helpful for me because my players, a lot of my players will often actually just wait for me to then deliver the recap. So like I posted up there so that they could read it ahead of time if they wanted. They're also very busy.
Because we're all adults and we have lives.
Right. Yeah, I do it at the beginning of the session anyway. But I mostly try to just get the names of anybody new that they met and the events that happened as record keeping for me. Because as Richard mentioned, writing the recap helps you really kind of know what's going to happen in the next session.
It's the best session prep.
So repeating those names, especially the ones that I pulled out of my ass mid-session, and the basic events that happened are usually enough for me to remember the details. And then a lot of the time when I'm actually reading the recap at the beginning of the session, I'll say either what will happen is I'll relate just the basic details of an event, and the players will all jump in and go, "Oh, wait, that was and then this, and then
And sometimes the players will correct me,
which
is great, and I'll be like, "Oh, thank you." And I'll just edit the recap a little bit, but then I realize it's actually a sneaky thing because it's like it's getting their story juices going.
Right before you milk them,
story juices. Yeah, story juices.
And then I'll also use it. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Josh.
I'll also use it occasionally, similar to what Richard was saying. Of every once in a while, I'll realize, oh, hold on, right? There was some confusion during the session that never got resolved, and it was purely a player confusion with no real role-playing value in it. And so in the recap, sometimes those come out and somebody will say, oh, I thought that this was happening because it's Friday night after a long school week and we're all drinking. So it's also a good opportunity to just kind of clarify some of those confusions that ultimately have no role-playing value and are just going to kind of grind the session.
Well, that also brings up the thing I was going to add is I also will, if there is a rules question, I will always make a best guess during a session with the understanding of my players that I'll look it up
Yep.
afterwards. And the recap is the best place to kind of work those house rules back into the system
Oh yeah.
in front of the player's mind. And then I have a house rules section of my world management where I start building, because I know if I make the ruling once at the table and I like the house rule, it's something that's going to change for the rest of the grand campaign. Like
Right.
in Jackals, I've developed like 5 new downtime actions based off the player's actions, and those need to be stressed. You changed the way light worked in your Gebrakan game.
Yeah.
Like you were building a ton of new actions for Tor and changing things,
Right.
because again, like Arbiter of Worlds says, a system is not complete when it is handed to you.
Right.
You will create new rules and mechanics sheerly by playing the game long enough.
In the words of the great Mike Tyson, everyone has a face until they get punched in the plan.
Any final comments on that one, Josh?
No, I was gonna just add on top of that. Yeah, sometimes during the session, you have to make a call, and then sometimes afterwards I'll decide, I actually don't like that, or I looked up the rule and found that it was different, and so it's at the beginning of the next session is always a good time to say, this was the ruling and this was the reasoning. We're going to stick with it, but so that going forward,
Yes.
because of these reasons here, or because the rule actually says this, going forward, we're going to rule it differently in the future. So it's always a good resetting and reminding of rules or putting new options kind of in the player's consciousness.
Awesome. Any final thoughts? Or I feel like we covered world management real well.
Yeah. I mean, if people go out and do half this stuff, their game is gonna kick ass.
Be exponentially better. Next month, we're going to talk about time and story management. Right? You can't have a meaningful campaign if you don't take meticulous time records.
You're just saying all caps.
Time management?
No, it's because in the Dragon article, it's in all caps.
It is in all caps. Yeah, this is a Gygax quote. We'll lead off. I'll pull out. I may even bring out the. You got to see that Gloranthan, the notes.
Oh yeah,
he was writing.
Yeah.
So, well, anyway, guys, thank you so much, Josh and Richard. Thank you for doing this. I love doing the grand campaign with you. To everybody who's watching, leave a comment, ask questions. We try to answer them as they come on, and check out the other great content on the Iconic Production channel. We'll be back next month with more grand campaign. Awesome, guys.